Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Balanced, where in each episode, Steve and I discuss a philosophical topic and try to use common sense, reason, and logic to find a way forward.
So, Ben, it's interesting. We said like a philosophical topic. That's what we try to stick to. It's a really interesting one for us, and I think it's a good direction here. So, this is episode 18, by the way, and what we have decided to call it is unidentified anomalous phenomena and the possibility of extraterrestrial intelligence.
Oh, and this is interesting because there's been so much in the news lately about this with some congressional hearings. And I feel like every time I go online, there's just, it's just filled with accounts of people seeing what what are now called UAPs.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So first things first, I want to know just to start this off, have you ever seen a UAP or what when we were growing up, right? It was they were calling it a UFO, unidentified flying object. Have you ever seen anything?
Well, when I was about 8, I did see one day, like this bright, I don't really know how to describe it, bright light kind of moving slowly. In my kid brain, what I thought it was like a rocket. It looked like a rocket ship, kind of. If you imagine like the glow of a rocket engine as it's lifting off,
Yeah.
it kind of looked like that. But when I think back on it now, I think it was probably, because we lived kind of near BWI,
Yeah.
the big airport, and I think it was probably just an airplane that was flying in the vicinity of the airport. And some of those like American airline planes, like back in the early 90s, had like the all chrome um polished exterior.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think
That
it was just caught the sun just right and like gave that impression. So I can't say that I've ever seen a UFO of any kind.
well, it's something you couldn't identify technically, right? At the time, for you, it was. Um, So yeah, and I wonder if you're in the Baltimore area back then, you hear about these. What is it called? Wallops Island in like the eastern shore of Virginia. Like I guess it's northeastern Virginia, where they've had some uh, satellite launches from there.
Hmm.
It's possible you saw something like that.
Oh,
And
that's interesting. I didn't even realize. I always think of I just think of Florida when I think of rocket launches.
yeah, yeah, and so they do some out of Virginia. I I believe it's NASA based, but I'd have to study up on that to tell you. So for me, there was one time when I was. This is now I know this is a bunch of bull, right? Because I was very young. I remember the house I was living in, and so I must have been about 8. Same thing as you, very young and impressionable, and it was Halloween. And I remember getting back from trick or treating, me and my brothers and my sister and everybody getting back, and it's sort of like getting on towards late. And there was a knock on the door. So no big deal, right? I can give out candy. So there's some candy next to the door. And I go open the door and there's nobody there, right? No, that's not, you could think, oh, some kid knocked and ran, right?
Sure.
Um, but but just as I opened the door, like above the tree line, we were close to like some woods over across the street from our.
Was this in Maryland?
This was in Montgomery Village, Maryland. Yeah,
Okay.
and it's much more built up now, but um, at that time, across the street from the townhouse development I was living in was just some woodland, not a huge expanse or anything. And above that, I saw the best I could describe. And again, I was 8 years old, and it's Halloween, right? And the
And you
door,
were you were just so hopped up on sugar.
yeah, yeah, and the door just someone knocked on it, and I opened it, and there was no one there. So I'm like all out of sorts, and there is a large circular um thing in the sky, like above the tree line, moving away from my house. Now, if I think about the memory I had now, and of course we know eyewitness testimony is shady at best, right? That's been proven scientifically. Um, if I had to tell you what it looked like now from that memory, I would say it was like there was a helicopter that had lights on the edge of the propeller blades,
Okay.
and in spinning around, of course, that would look like a circle.
Mm-hmm.
that's what I ended up as I got a little older thinking that had to be what that was.
Hmm.
And I remember being a little kid and I just closed the door. I'm not like, some of these people in some of these science fiction movies, they see something crazy and they like go out and follow it into the
Run
woods. Or,
run towards it. Yeah.
yeah, I'm not that. I wasn't that type of kid. So, no, I don't know that I've ever seen a helicopter that had the lights on the edges of the rotor blades like that, but that's the best I could deduce in as I grew a little older
Hmm.
what that must have been. But
Well,
so
the helicopter analogy does give a sense of scale, size, distance,
yeah,
movement.
yeah, exactly, exactly. But the funny thing is, the one thing I don't remember at that young age, and it could have been because I was sort of like a little kid, sort of in shock a little bit. I don't remember hearing any helicopter,
Hmm.
so sort of just like silent.
Yeah.
But but anyway, I don't know. I don't know. So that's the best I can give you for something unidentified and flying.
Yeah.
It's funny that we were both 8. So
Yeah, that is kind of funny. I mean, because at that age, you're still kind of getting your mind around how the world works and how to explore possibilities and how to think um, about abstraction and concepts. Like to me, I see a bright light moving slowly in the sky and think like, oh, it's some kind of a rocket or something, because rockets are in the forefront of every 8-year-old boy's minds.
sure, sure. And I can say one thing when I was in the army and we were doing some exercises with the Italian army, their mountain troops in the Italian Alps. And you know, in the middle of the night, you stop, you bed down and you freeze, right? But you're there. There's no ambient light, right, from a town or anything. We're out in the middle of nowhere and very high up in elevation. In winter, clear skies, no clouds, and you could lay there and some guys like, hey, look at that thing right there, and there's like a little tiny thing coming across, a little light, looks like a little star, but it's moving and it's coming across and the guy says, look, hey, another guy says, I see another one, and people are starting to look, and this guy goes, guys, those are satellites. If you wait like 12 minutes or something, I forget what he said back then, he said you'll see them come around again.
Hmm.
And so we did, and I was like, well, yeah, that makes sense, so a lot of things that people can see, easily explained. So but if it was just like, a couple of us knuckleheads out there and it wasn't the guy who seemed to know a little bit about what he was talking about, we would have probably thought, oh man, what are we seeing here? So
You can see how, right, people start to concoct all different types of stories to explain that.
exactly, because you have to explain it. You want to explain. That's, I guess, human nature, right? We want to explain what that must be. So initial thoughts, why this topic, why are we doing this? Well, I'm going to tell you this is much what you brought up on September 14th this year, 2023. NASA's unidentified anomalous phenomena independent study team published its final report. That's one thing, we're going to talk about that today. And then on October 6th, about 3 weeks later, the independent published an article about that there have been 1,923 unidentified anomalous phenomena, which I'll just refer to as UAP sightings in the state of Maryland, reported to the National UFO Reporting Center so far this year, 2023. And I live in Maryland, so
Hmm.
that for me, that's why this topic. I think you
Yeah.
already stated it's like you can't get on the internet for any serious amount of time without running into something about this, right?
Yeah, and one other thing I'll add is that I think this is a topic, like many of our topics, but this one specifically, I think is something that is topical, and because, like you said, we had these hearings, that this report came out, and there's a lot of talk online about UAPs and people posting videos of sightings, but this is just a topic in general that I think could really use a healthy dose of skepticism and critical thought and logic, and hopefully we can kind of put it through some of those filters and see where we end up.
Well said there. So I'm going to talk about a little history. I did some research on some history. As you know, people have always, and I'm getting a lot of this information from Wikipedia, right? People have always reported unexplained phenomena in the skies. Many accounts in history were treated as supernatural portents, angels, or other religious omens. And there's just tons of examples of ancient accounts listed um, in different places from as far back as 240 BC. So it's been strange things that people don't know what they are in the sky has been a
Mm-hmm.
thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so here's something interesting. In World War II, the Pacific and European theaters, there were round glowing fireballs that they actually called Foo Fighters, which I didn't know that's where the name of that band came from.
Yeah, right.
Were reported by Allied and Axis pilots. So they just saw glowing, what they described as fireballs. So explanations, people say, oh, that was St. Elmo's fire, which is like an anomaly of the atmosphere. Could be the planet Venus. Hallucinations from oxygen deprivation, probably very possible, right?
Sure. Yeah.
um, and or German secret weapons. The Germans were trying to work on different things. So those are some of the things. But so it was a big thing, and these are military pilots who are flying dangerous missions, um, in terrible conditions. They don't where they're up there in sub-zero temperatures.
Absolutely archaic technology at that time
Yeah,
too. If you look at the aircraft and how, yeah, it just you could totally see that.
exactly. So for people to start reporting stuff, like it's like they've got enough important stuff on their mind just to try to survive this. Like I'm thinking there's something they saw, right? No one's just making it up.
And for
So
folks
someone's
who are maybe listening and don't know what St. Elmo's fire is, that's a almost like a glowing plasma that forms on the outside of aircraft when they move through the high atmosphere. Is that right?
Yeah, I did a little research on that, and it is what they refer to as an atmospheric anomaly, based on several different things. It's definitely something that is explainable, that people used to just say, give a name to it. Just like, you know, we've talked about this before. But human nature is people want to explain what they're seeing, what they're feeling, what they're hearing,
Mm-hmm.
and so someone sees something strange and they give it a name, right? So, um, and then later on, science finds out what it is, and maybe we still refer to that old name, but we know it's something that's very scientifically explainable.
Sure.
Um, so, okay. History continued. Still a lot of history. The UFO craze began. There's a media frenzy surrounding a civilian pilot, this guy named Kenneth Arnold. And this was in the year was like basically like 45, I think. And he reported a group of bat-like aircraft. This is, quote, a group of bat-like aircraft flying in formation at high speeds, end quote, near Mount Rainier, which is Washington State, correct? And
And you said this was in the 40s?
this was in the 40s.
Okay.
Yeah. And he was a pilot. He was a civilian pilot. And he said they were moving like a saucer would if it was skipped across the water. And
Huh.
that's where the first headline, right?
Now, what's interesting about this to me as you're describing it is that flying saucer, of course, is a phrase everyone's familiar with, and we've all seen depictions of these UFOs, especially like in the 50s and 60s, that kind of like metal disc dinner plate with the hump in the middle. Like that's a very common, I think, image in pop culture. But he's referring to them as saucers, but he's describing them as bat-like, which is not
Yeah.
obviously not saucer shaped.
And the thing is, like, because he said they moved like a saucer would, if you skip rocks on water, right? I don't know
Mm-hmm.
why but he said they were bat-like aircraft. So, but anyway, someone just heard saucer, skipping across, flying saucer. Some reporter dubbed that, wrote it in a headline, and there it was. Within weeks of this, there were reports of flying saucer sightings almost on a daily basis. Then finally, in 1947, I'm sure you've heard of some of these names. The U.S. Air Force started to investigate these reports. They had different projects. They called Project Sign, Project Grudge, and then the one I think we've all heard about, at least I had in the past, Project Blue Book. The Air Force had cataloged 12,618 different sightings. And they were going out, sending investigators out to try to like talk to people, figure out, is there anything to this? They were doing a lot of work. They at least thought at that time, hey, this is a possibility. A lot of people are reporting stuff. Something must be there.
Hmm.
And then finally, look at this in 1969. University of Colorado released the Condon Report, um, which concluded basically, quote, nothing has come from the study of UFOs in the past 21 years that has added to scientific knowledge, right? So the Air Force sort of cut it off, and people were still some believing in these flying saucers and different UFO reports. In 1969, these people are like, come on, this is not a thing. The University of Colorado does a study. Condon, Condon, that's the name of a guy who published the paper, who did a lot of research and said, there's just nothing here. It was big. People got into it. And remember, there's a lot of old movies and stuff about flying saucers and things of that nature.
Yeah, yeah, it became part of the public consciousness.
Yeah, and they said basically from the 60s to the 90s, it remained a part of pop culture, right? America has had an obsession with supernatural, paranormal, different things. We still do today. I see all these shows on these different cable and streaming services about ghost hunters and the unexplained and different things of that nature. So it basically was from the 60s to the 90s, sort of like, hey, it's a big thing in movies and people tell stories, but I don't think anyone really took it too seriously. It was definitely fringe.
Mm-hmm.
But back in 61, um, there was an alien abduction account sensationalized. I don't know if you've heard this. Barney and Betty Hill, this couple, they were,
Was this the couple that was in their car and they lost time?
yes, they were in their car. They saw a UFO, then totally lost time and like woke up and were like, what happened? And there's a lot of stuff you can read on this. And then they underwent hypnosis because people were like, "You're just crazy. There's nothing happened." And they're like, "No, listen, we did lose several hours. We need to explain this." And so someone put them under hypnosis, and they were able to recover some memories. I'm not going to go into what types of things they said because that would be a whole different episode if we wanted to
Yeah,
discuss
yeah.
that. But the bottom line is, I have, as far as stories I did a little research in my life on explanations for alien abductions, and here's why. You think I'm getting off topic here, but
No, no.
stick with me. So when I was in the military and I was stationed in Italy, we worked hard and we partied hard, right? I had an instance of heavy alcohol use over at like a long weekend that we had. And so guys are going out and partying and doing barbecues and just traveling and doing whatever, right? And I'll tell you, it was safe. Nobody drove cars. We all took the bus or the train because we were in Europe, and that's what it was. So no one was driving drunk or anything. But
Thanks for adding that.
yeah, well, hey, it's I don't want everyone to think poorly of our military people. So after this weekend, you get home and you're like, okay, I've got basically Sunday to recover, or maybe it's Monday to recover, back to work on Tuesday, whatever. It was a long weekend, and you're just knocked out. And I actually um, had some experiences when I was awake in the barracks in the room at night, felt like I could not move, but I was fully awake,
Hmm.
and had the feeling that there was something that was watching me, and or like the sensation of something sneaking up on me that was just about to be there.
Hmm.
Very, very scary. And it was really strange. And it seemed like it lasted hours to me, but not even being able to move. And
And this was just alcohol? You guys weren't doing anything
yeah,
else?
yeah, no, just alcohol. And so I did some research, and actually I saw a TV show. This was years ago. And I remember that. And this one TV show, they were like debunking alien abductions, and or trying to, and they talked about the sleep paralysis. And I did a lot of research on that. I'm convinced I had sleep paralysis. So I feel like there's a lot of alien abduction stories that are from what I've seen, that Now, this doesn't affect Barney and Betty Hill because they were driving in a
Hmm.
car, right?
Hmm.
So totally different. But for the most part, these alien abductions, someone's like in their home and something comes and takes them out of their home. They feel like they're being watched. They feel like they can't move. There's different lights. There was a light in the hallway, and that was just in the barracks. The emergency light that stays on, so it's never totally dark, right? In a hallway in a big concrete building, right? And but that and above each door we had a window, a little thin window. So there's this light shining in. So I had all these things, and I was like, this is just like what some people. All you would have to do is give me a little bit extra thought of like maybe I just watched like an alien movie the night before. Then I'm sure I would have been thinking I'm being
Yeah.
abducted
Yeah.
because it was
It sounds like what you're saying is not all, but certainly some of these. Like I was abducted from my house. I was lifted up through the roof by my chest by a beam of light and taken into a spacecraft. There's some of that could be explained away, but potentially by like a sleep paralysis, where essentially you're dreaming, or your mind, part of your mind is in sleep mode, but you're still awake. Is that, am I kind of
yeah,
understanding that
yeah,
right?
yeah. It's like you're awake and you literally cannot move. You are it's like that part of your body to move. It's shut off.
Like it is when you're asleep.
Yeah, like totally shut off. Like you, but when you're asleep, you can move around. Like you can roll around a little bit, right? And I don't know what the sleep wake thing is when if I'm rolling around because uh, I've been sleeping on my arm and I want to move, and sometimes that happens in the middle. I don't know if I'm really technically awake when that happens or not, but you're definitely actually paralyzed in terms of you cannot like lift a finger,
Mm.
even if you feel like you want to and you're awake. So
Hmm.
I think sleep paralysis explains a lot. And so if you go back there's some old paintings from like medieval times, even further back when people are depicted with like in their bed and there's like a demon sitting on their chest type
Oh,
of
sure,
thing.
sure, yeah.
And that those they're saying that's sleep paralysis. People feeling like something's on them, something's watching them, something's looking down on them. And it's a lot of that sensation. If something's looking down on me, I can't move. Like you would want to cover up or something, you can't. So anyway, I think most part alien abduction, a lot can be explained by that from the research I've done. But the Barney and Betty Hill, who knows, right? Because they were driving in a car.
Hmm. Hmm.
So that was in 61, but people still were like, this is fringe. They're crazy. But still, in the 60s to the 90s, people were watching movies and there was TV shows and people writing books, and science fiction was the big craze then, right? So it's still always a thing people are thinking about, but no one really, not nobody, but for the most part, people are like, yeah, it's an interesting possibility, but it's not a big deal. Um, then suddenly we're up into 2017. The New York Times breaks a story of the secret Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program, and a bunch of videos get leaked from the Pentagon. And so people started bringing these things back and saying, "Oh man, is this real? This
Hmm.
is." And some of these Pentagon videos of these from these Navy pilots and from different Air Force aircraft having things either on radar or actual pictures,
These
photographs.
these would be these would be like, for example, the Tic Tac
Yeah, yeah,
UFO videos, or from the Navy fighter pilots.
yeah. These types of things start getting released, and there was an advanced aviation threat ID program, and so the Times breaks this story saying, "Hey, listen." But really, the Pentagon's looking at this, Department of Defense is looking at this saying, hey, if Russia, China, someone has some really high speed aircraft, we need to like open up a study to make sure that we can see if what these things are. But the bottom line is there's certain percentage of them. They're like, we don't know what the hell this is, and we don't think it's the Russians or the Chinese.
Hmm.
So this comes out, and people start sort of, hey, maybe this is a thing now. What's going on? There's naval officers reporting things, and people are supposedly pretty trusted and have their wherewithal about them. So then July 2021, a Harvard astronomer, his name is Avi Loeb, he announced the Galileo project. Have you heard of this?
I have not.
So he's like, hey, I'm going to use high tech, the best astronomical equipment, stuff we have in satellites, stuff we have in the best telescopic things that we have that are earthbound to seek evidence of extraterrestrial artifacts in space. and even in our atmosphere. So now he's like saying, hey, listen, I've seen these videos. Some of these can't be explained. Let's get science in on this. It's about time, huh?
Yeah, that makes sense.
We come to, up to present time, what you're talking about. There are two government sponsored programs, NASA's UAP, Independent Study Team, which that report just came out recently in September, right? And then there's an all domain anomaly resolution office. They were charged by Congress to investigate UFOs, and they actually adopted what the name where we got to UAP, unexplained aerial phenomenon. Now you notice it was aerial. So it's not UFO. They go, it's UAP, but it's not anomalous. It's
Hmm.
unexplained aerial, and I'll explain why that changed from aerial to anomalous in a second here. But they really changed that. UFO wasn't that they were so upset with it, but they said it's just associated with past sensationalism and movies, and it's just too much. Let's get away from that because we don't want a bunch of kooky people trying to reach out to
Okay.
the
That
UFO
that
study.
that actually makes sense. I'm down with that change.
Yeah. So yeah, it makes sense. And then in the May 17th, 2022, the House Intelligence Subcommittee on Counterterrorism, Counterintelligence, and Counterproliferation held congressional hearings with top military officials because those Pentagon videos were leaked, right? And the New York Times broke that story. And now Congress is like, hey, DOD, let's talk about this. What the heck is going on, right?
And they're
Um,
and they're basically saying we as lawmakers and leaders need to know if this is like classified technology. We need to know if this is coming from other nation states, um, so we can
is it
be
dangerous, right? Yeah.
right, right.
Is it a threat to the United States in any way, shape, or form? They're like, what is going on here? And then
And
that's
at a minimum, is it a threat to like commercial aircraft, for example? If we have these UAPs flying around and no one knows and no one can track them and no one knows where they are, obviously there's a lot of air traffic.
Yeah, exactly. And here we are. So now we're to present day. The aerial was changed to anomalous based in part on reports of waterborne UAP sightings. So
And
actually,
even some reports of the craft transitioning between water and flight, right?
yes, absolutely, absolutely. Coming either going into the water and or leaving the water or both. So like having something, hey, something went in, it's underwater for a ways, and then oh, it came up over there and it's out of here.
Yeah.
So it's crazy stuff, right? So do people believe in this? 32%, according to a Harris poll, 32% of Americans believe in UFOs. What does that mean, though, right?
Yeah,
So,
what does that mean? Because it's one thing to say, well, I believe in UFOs. I believe there are things up there that we don't know what they are. That's different than I believe there are craft piloted by aliens that are freely moving around.
so June 2012, National Geographic does a study. 36% of Americans believe UFOs exist. Still, to your point, what does that mean? 10% of people thought they had spotted one. Okay, so people are believing. June 2021 Pew Research poll, 51. This is to your question because they're getting these poll questions better now. 51% of Americans thought UFOs reported by the military were likely to be evidence of intelligent life from beyond the earth.
That's a big percentage.
That is a big percentage. And that's just a few years. And why do you think in 2022, right after people feel like that, Congress is like, hey, we need to know what's going on, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, because those Pentagon videos had been popping around for a few years, and now a lot of Americans are like something's up there. This is good, real stuff. There, people are half of the people. In August 2021, a Gallup, 41% of adults believe some UFOs involve alien spacecraft from other planets. Again, big percentage and very
Huge.
specific questioning, right?
Yeah.
Um, and then October 2022, there's a YouGov poll that's run by, probably just the federal government. I'm imagining it says 34% of Americans believe UFOs are likely to involve alien life forms.
Wow. I'm surprised at these numbers of people saying flatly, yes, I think they're aliens. And I guess I shouldn't be, but I am. But this does kind of come back to what I was saying before about why this topic is important to talk about. I mean, that's a lot of people who are saying they're convinced that something unexplained has an explanation, and that the explanation is that aliens traveled here and are flying around.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, to me, I'm reading these numbers and I'm thinking, when I was doing this research, I'm thinking, who are they asking these questions to?
Yeah.
Like, what neighborhoods are they in here? I don't know. I'm not a pollster and I don't have ideas how these things are asked, but generally when I get something, a phone call at my house, it's a political something or other from one of these committees or one of these groups, and I just hang up, right? I don't take it, but I guess that's what they do, or they just actually have these robocalls going around randomly, and you pick up and they're like, hey, we want to give you a poll on UAPs. Do you think that it just seems
I
interesting?
would take that poll if I got that call.
Yeah, I would if I got that call. I definitely would. So do you believe that UAPs could be intelligent life forms from beyond the earth? I would ask you this. I think we should both answer this. If you do, why? If you don't, why not?
With
I think I'm ready to answer this.
Go ahead.
I would say this for me. It's do I believe that UAPs could be evidence of extraterrestrial intelligence? I would say I believe it's possible. I
Okay.
definitely believe it is a possibility, but
Sure.
I cannot say, especially not having seen anything that I couldn't explain in the sky since I was 8. um, I cannot say 100%, but I have to say that it's possible.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with you there for sure that
And as to why, not to interrupt you, but if you say, "Oh, you think it's possible, Steve?" Why? Well, because the universe is so vast. There must be. Well, am I to think that it goes on forever and ever and ever, as vast as it is, and that, oh no, but we're the only ones that this is just we're special. Couldn't have
sure.
been all the right set of circumstances somewhere else. It
Well, you know
doesn't make sense.
what's interesting about that is that vastness cuts both ways because to your point, and I've thought about this too, you think about the sheer number of galaxies and that those galaxies each contain trillions of stars and some number that is beyond human comprehension of those stars contain planets in a habitable zone that of course there's life out there, but the other side of that blade is that for any species to advance to a point where they could cover those distances,
Sure.
it just is such a huge hurdle. So, I mean, what I would say, yes, it certainly is possible. I have seen nothing, read nothing that would convince me that, like, oh, yeah, it's definitely aliens. For there to be aliens here or for aliens to have visited here, I mean, it would just take a tremendous, almost impossible conspiracy to keep that underground.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I hear you. And it's funny you said something there, well, as you were talking about the habitable regions, right? Based upon the proper circumstances, like Earth and the warmth and the oxygen and the atmosphere and all this for life.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking as vast as all of the universe is as well, that's habitable regions for life as we know it. There could
Well,
be
yeah,
life as we do not know it that is totally different type of circumstances that would be habitable for that other kind of life that we can't even fathom what that means.
that's true. That is true. And there are examples even on Earth of species that live, for example, in the volcanic vents, on the ocean floor where the temperature is like you wouldn't think anything could survive there, and yet
Yeah,
there's microbes and other things that do live in those environments. But I think the idea about like the habitable zone is based on kind of our fundamental understanding of the building blocks of carbon-based life,
sure, sure.
based on rules that exist in the universe that we live in. So, like we know, for example, that um, in order for there to be life, there would need to be water,
Yeah,
and how much water a planet has could be directly, So, I don't know. It's a complicated
yeah.
topic.
Based on the carbon-based life forms as we know them, yeah, definitely. There are certain things that need to be present, right? Neither of us are professors in biology, so I don't know if we can speak to that directly. Um, but so therefore, we both believe it's possible. So then NASA does this report and it's released to the public, and I'm all excited, right? So I'm thinking, here we go.
You thought the answers were all going to be herein.
Yeah, I'm thinking, here we go. They found something, and they're letting us know what an exciting time. What are they going to say? This is going to be incredible, So I'm coming at it with the optic of this is going to be your next great science fiction movie type of scene, right? Where I'm reading this thing and I'm like, oh man. So the bottom line, here's what NASA says. I want to talk about their basic bottom line at the end of this report. It's about 45 pages, the finished product. And, I read it front to back and just wanted to see what's in there. So, number one, their number one bottom line, we have to apply scientific methodology in our studies of these things, right? And they believe, like, as to now, videos and pilots and scrambling jets, and that's not scientific. Yeah, we're not saying people didn't see anything, but we have to be. And one example of what they said from this, if you're reading this report, you can't just look at something and do studies and measurements and calculations and say, well, we don't know what it is, and assume that it's like an alien thing.
Sure.
They say you would have to prove that it absolutely could not be of this earth. Just not, oh, we don't know what it is. Maybe it's an alien. Like,
Mm-hmm,
no,
mm-hmm.
we know 100%. We have hard proof that this is not from anywhere on earth. And that's a much higher standard.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think that's sort of the way you've been leaning the whole time, right? As the skeptic.
Well, yeah, and that's what I was going to say. While we both acknowledge it's possible, my position is it's incredibly unlikely. There are so many other potential explanations before we get to alien technology.
Yeah, agreed. And so I like the way they're coming, even though they didn't give me a big paragraph that said, yeah, in fact, that Roswell thing was real, right? Or anything like that. Like I was waiting for it, didn't come. And then this, I felt like this, like you wrote this part of the report on the bottom line. It actually said, this is a quote from the actual NASA report. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence,
Yes.
period. And that's the bottom line. Like, in other words, we want to see it, like the little man in the ship, for example, and then we want to study that and prove that it wasn't fabricated somewhere on Earth. Prove
Yeah. Yeah.
that So they're like, hey, it's got to be big for us to go to all the way to that extraterrestrial intelligence. So, and that's always where you, as that skeptic, have sort of been existing when it comes
I
to these
just
things.
think I just think it's a great rule for like critical thought. I mean, if you have a claim, that's extraordinary, it should come with extraordinary evidence. It should require extraordinary evidence.
Yeah,
It's just a great filter.
and yeah, we've talked about that also in our religion episode, right? Hey, give me some big evidence, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's just, it's almost funny. I would almost think, based upon some of the stories, like I would almost be, I'm going to go out on a limb here, Ben. So I would almost expect it as to be easier to prove extraterrestrial intelligence than to prove some of the claims of religion.
Oh, yeah. I mean, well, this gets into a whole other conversation about the early human interpretation of religion and religious texts were uh, inspired by the visitation of aliens. That's how people came up with angels and people that come down on beams of light. If we're saying it's possible that it's within the realm of possibility that it actually is aliens, who's to say that they didn't show up here 4,000 years ago to the Egyptians
Yeah,
and either give them technology or give them a show that influenced the way early humans thought about the world. You know what I mean? And that religion is just how they um, ended up explaining it all. Because as you said before, the human mind seeks explanation.
yeah. So again, that's the second bottom line. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. I think we both agree. So, and we want to be very scientific. So NASA's, although it's not the way out wild crazy report that I would have maybe enjoyed reading, it's making sense, right? The third bottom line, so it is at the very least, they use the word plausible, that some unexplained UAPs could have extraterrestrial origin. But they go right back to it. That makes it sound like they're going out on a limb. But they
Hmm.
say, but the scientific method required that, as stated before, it be proved that a UAP absolutely 100% cannot be of terrestrial origin.
And I think there's a lot of people that would say, well, that bar of proof is met when you show them a very blurry video of something that looks like a silver tic tac bursting out of the surface of the ocean and flying through the air and then going back into the ocean, and whatever those videos, I haven't seen them in a while.
Yeah.
But it's also worth mentioning here that we simply don't know. I mean, the average person just doesn't know the actual state of technology. And if you consider that some of what, like, for example, the SR-71 program, the supersonic spy plane,
Yep.
that thing was developed in the late 50s, early 60s, and started flying in the early 70s. Those dates might not be exactly right, but roughly. The F-117 Nighthawk, another Skunk Works stealth project that still looks modern if you were to see one sitting on a runway, and that's from the late 70s. So, you don't know how far beyond our modern understanding of technology the government and the military actually is. I mean, they could be working on stuff. They could have propulsion technologies that we just don't know anything about.
Yeah, I mean,
Possible.
it is possible. It is possible, and you would think that something would, when Congress inquires, though, there'd be some sort of level of they'd have to come clean with something.
Yeah.
But then again, those weren't all, to my knowledge, they weren't all open. There's certain things in those hearings that they're closed, and because they're a classified level, and so they're not going to let the news in, and they're not going to let people just sit in there and listen, right? So it's possible, but I think this number three in the NASA bottom line is sort of like what we said. Hey, it's possible, right? So keep an open mind. So NASA's saying it's at least plausible that it could, although we haven't proven anything close to that. But at least they're keeping their mind open. I'm glad it's just not some sort of government line like, hey, it's not. They're saying it's plausible.
Uh-huh.
They're sticking to being scientists and not trying to just shove down our throats what maybe the government would rather us hear.
Well, so far
So
so fair on these points.
yep. And then the fourth one, it's really interesting. I thought they included this, is that they're sort of talking about all the technology and all of the methods during this report. There's a lot of things that are like sort of over my head. And they're like, hey, we could do this. We could use this type of statistical, graphing, and we could do. They're talking about all these different, like using the private sector based, upward looking from Earth technology with the world net of satellite coverage that they have, and sort of like they're just talking a lot of things and saying, hey, these are the things we can give so much to help with this scientific investigation, and we're the experts at it. Let us do this, right? And they did see enough clearly to mention, hey, our involvement will decrease the stigma and increase reporting,
Mm-hmm.
because and people trust NASA, right? I thought about that, and it's because of the public trust that we have. I know a lot of people don't trust, like, take the IRS or something. People don't trust them for anything. But generally, you hear NASA and you're like, hey, yeah, they're trying to get up there. They're looking at things. They're involved in the International Space Station. They've done the shuttles, and we've, for the most part, people say, hey, it's not a shady, overbearing government entity.
That's true. I think there's a lot of respect for the organization.
And therefore they're saying, listen, if we're at the head of this, if we take this banner and we're the person holding it, a lot of people who might not have reported before because they'd be thinking, oh, everyone's going to think I'm crazy, they'll come forward and say, hey, here's something I filmed, here's something I did, here's something I saw, and report it, right? So but it's just sort of interesting that they thought to mention that, almost like they're like, they know there are some decision makers, some elected officials that are going to be reading this report, and they're sort of saying, "Hey, by the way, it's only going to help to have us do it." right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Um, their fifth bottom line: the highest technology should be applied, and reporting methods. They're talking about for the military, for local, state, and federal government, for private sector, scientific community, and especially civilians should be consistent. Now, they brought up the possibility of a phone-based app for the public. So you take a video, you see something, and it's going to take all that, and then you enter it into the app and say, "This is something I can't explain," and this is automatically shared
mm-hmm,
with people conducting the studies, and they take all that, even the geo location, all the information from your phone, from where the picture was taken, and the angle and everything, and they said they could just make all these things that people might put on YouTube or something on social media. They saw something,
mm-hmm.
they could really put it to good scientific use if it was all reported consistently. And then they'd have that app. They'd have your contact information if an investigator wanted to call you, and they'd automatically get that video. And just so I was like, man, that's pretty cool. What do you think?
I agree. I think it's cool. I feel like, would I download that on my phone? Uh my expectations of seeing anything that I would use the app to record are so low. I don't see myself going through the trouble, but I do think, because I did kind of want to get into a couple of the other reasons for my skepticism. And one of them is, I don't know, I have a very hard time accepting that in the modern age, when every single person almost has a high definition camera in their pocket, and you have all this advanced technology and these, Navy assets and all these things, I have never, ever seen a video ever of a purported UAP that wasn't blurry and shaky and really hard to see. There has never been a clear video of everything. And I mean, you know, I think that's saying something. If
Yeah.
they were here, if they were actually moving around, if they were as mysterious, you're telling me that no one has ever been able to get a clear piece of footage. So I don't know, maybe an app like this is good just for the consistency, but I don't know.
I mean,
I would love to see some video that's not all blurry and shaky.
I hear what you're saying, and see, some of the things they talked about with being able to get these videos with the locations and all the information from your phone and where it was taken and everything. Because if several people, this is really interesting. They said if several people take videos of the same thing, then they can do certain measurements and calculations based upon where the phones were and what angle they were at and everything that's within that data in that video or that photo, and they can actually do calculations because they cited several things that they have studied from the like sort of the Pentagon videos, that they were like, yeah, everyone's like, this thing's moving at 700, 800 miles an hour. Nothing can move this quick. And like NASA already, some of the ones that were unknown, they were able to science it out and say, yeah, no, we know what that is. That
Mm-hmm.
it's really not moving that fast. But we
Mm-hmm.
can understand from the angle of that film and where it was with the aperture and the curve of the Earth, how it would look like it's moving that fast and how you would make that calculation.
Yeah.
But here's what we did on top of it, and apply all sorts of crazy math and things. Like I said, some of the report was over my head, and they're able to say that thing was really going 180 miles an hour. That's completely an airplane, right?
Huh.
So it's very interesting, and that's sort of, they're not saying only to prove it, but to report it so they can debunk just as much or explain just as much. So I said I would get the app if it came out, in the hopes of one day that I could uh, you know
Contribute something.
contribute something. But
Well, would the app let you look at and see other people's videos? Because then, that would be pretty interesting.
that would be probably the way they could get a lot of people to get the app. So maybe we should let NASA know about that. I didn't even think about that. I was assuming probably no, right? Um, but I'm not sure. It's possible. Or if there's like the 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 most questionable video of the week or something, something that they post,
Yeah. Yeah.
that would be pretty cool. So, but I hear what you're saying with hey, how come everyone's walking around with cameras better than they made movies with in the 50s, right? In their pocket.
I mean, yeah, there's more photographs being taken um today than have ever been taken in the history of the world ever, because of the proliferation of cell phones and, like you said, how good the cameras are. And it's actually an incredible aspect of this whole topic to me, that despite that fact that everyone has these very capable cameras, there has yet to be ever that I've ever seen, and I would imagine that I would have seen it if something did come out, because I'm sure it would spread like wildfire, a clear video that showed something clear. It's always grainy, blurry, shaky, too far away, a blurry light on the horizon. Always, always.
I mean, and this is interesting because I was thinking as you were talking of, I went on a run yesterday, and I was just, I never wear any because I run on trails, and it's surprising to me how many people have headphones in. I see them coming by, and or I startle them if I pass them, because I'm looking out for bikes, for animals, for, just any noises, mountain bikers and stuff will be like on your left, and they zoom by. And if you've got headphones in, you're just going to get like hit by someone.
So you run
So
without headphones, you're saying?
I run without headphones, and I have my phone with me. I was going on a pretty medium run, and I just had phone strapped to my phone strapped to my arm. So it's not easily accessible because I'd have to unstrap it and pull it out of the holder and everything. But I see this deer just barreling like very close to me right off the trail, and then following it. I don't know if it's that time of year or whatever, if it was a mating thing. Is a big buck following this deer, this doe, and like in running so close to me that I actually startled him, and he did a 90-degree turn real quick, like he was cutting, making a
Yeah.
move in football or something, just like I totally, because he was focused on this doe, right? Um, it would have been the best video that I would have captured. And if I was going on one of my longer runs, when I take a water bladder with me, so I can drink throughout, then I've got my phone just in this little mesh pocket. I can pull it out. But so I'm saying, hey, a lot of times people don't get those. I'm playing devil's advocate for you here. Well, a lot of times, and I saw that, and it was an incredible thing to see at so close to me. The thing must have cut away from me when it was like 10 feet away.
I see what you're saying. That
it,
that
it,
that that these some of these encounters could be so quick, people don't have time to get a shot.
yeah, because people aren't just walking around, like with a GoPro on their chest all the time. I mean, some people
Sure,
do. Some
sure.
people do probably, right? Like some of these mountain bikers and stuff. But I mean, so I don't know, man. I hear what you're saying, but then I see sometimes with myself, and I'm like, yeah,
But
that was
but every
totally.
time but every time someone has pulled out their phone or their camera or their video camera, or it's been captured on a dash cam or whatever, the number of times that there has been time and people pull it out and actually get some footage,
It's just bad, right?
it's just bad. It's never, yeah, it's always it just never clearly shows anything clearly.
The types of people who run into these situations don't have like the latest iPhone, right?
But I think that's the point, that even if you do have the latest iPhone with the best camera and optical
Yeah,
zoom and all this stuff, it's just, it seems impossible to capture something where, like, people see. I mean, there was that video that went viral recently, a couple months ago, of that airliner. It purports to show, and it is pretty clear, I have to say, it's a thermal image video from a military aircraft. And tell me if you saw this. And it shows um, a second aircraft that appears to be like the shape of a commercial jet, and it's surrounded by these three orbs that are kind of like circling it, and then the orbs and the jetliner all kind of disappear in this flash.
I have not seen that.
Okay. I saw it on Reddit or something, and my initial reaction was that someone made that, and that's
Yeah,
pretty entertaining. And I know, because I saw it pop up in a few other places, that it got a lot of attention. There were a lot of people that were talking about it. Of course, it eventually became, oh, that's the missing MH380. Is that the airplane, the Malaysian Airlines plane that
yeah,
went
yeah,
missing?
yeah, yeah.
Yep. So people were like, oh, that's what happened. It's Malaysian Airlines, which I personally think is a little disrespectful to the families.
Sure,
But
sure.
but then later I saw it came out that the exact, so like, I guess visual effects artists get these software packs that include different like animations, things they can use when they're editing, if they need like an explosion or they need electricity or they need some,
Okay.
and the guy found the exact effect that was used
As the Flash.
as the Flash. Yes. And
Yeah, yeah.
he lined them up and showed. So, and even then there were still people who were saying, I believe it's authentic. I don't know. I just think there's a huge appetite for this type of stuff. And I think that people, in a lot of cases, unfortunately, want to believe.
Yeah, yeah.
It's more fun to believe.
I was just thinking that is it that it's more fun to believe, or do people like want something to be real because they feel like it'll somehow help change things and make sense of the world or their place within it? I don't know.
Yeah, I just think it's more fun. Here's another example. A buddy of mine sent me a picture. He was reading an article online about this thing. I forget the name of it exactly, but it was basically an aluminum wedge. Okay, so like a big aluminum triangle.
Yeah.
And he sent me a picture of it and said, with a link to the article. And he said, he's like, I don't think this is necessarily aliens, but I think that it proves that ancient humans were more technologically advanced than we realize. And the claim was that this thing was found in a layer of sediment along with some mastodon bones. And so they were dating it back before humans had figured out how to make aluminum, basically.
Hmm.
And, the article speculated that it was perhaps a piece of the landing gear of an alien spaceship. So that
That's a
really
big jump
was,
there. That's a
yeah,
big
yeah. But
that's
that was the kind of the favorite theory of like, oh, you can imagine if an alien ship came here and it was a vertical landing and takeoff and it landed and that piece just got left behind. And, I read the article and I looked at the picture and I did about 4 minutes of Googling, and it turns out that it was an excavator tooth, like on the bucket of a bulldozer.
yeah.
Like, and they had the diagram of it in the picture, and it's a exact, but it just illustrates how we we want these things to be true because they make the world so much more interesting. It's so much more fun
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
think that, oh, it's this thing that it proves this, but it really, in a lot of these cases, there are logical explanations for them. And I'll just go over a couple of my other what I've called reasons for skepticism on this
Okay.
topic specifically, because I think it's something that requires healthy skepticism. Another one would be, if you look back now, you talked a little bit about in the 50s is when the idea of the flying saucer and like aliens coming like really kind of took off in the popular
Sort of like, yeah, late 40s.
yeah, late 40s. And so if you go back through history and you look at images that purport to show flying saucers, UFOs, alien technology, it just strikes me that the crafts that are shown are always aesthetically in line with the era in which they emerge. And what I mean by that is, like, you see a picture from the 50s, a black and white picture, and the 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 UFO, I'm using air quotes when I say that, looks a lot like something you would have seen on like
Yeah.
what's that,
Lo-
Danger, Will
Lost in
Robinson,
Space.
Lost in Space. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Like, and same thing in the 60s through the 70s. Like, you would think that if these were authentic pictures of alien spacecraft, it would be taken in the 50s, but it would depict something so out of this world, so advanced, it would look like an F-22, the way an F-22 fighter jet would look if you dropped it in the 1950s. I mean,
Yeah.
it would just defy all convention. And I don't see that. I see a very consistent aesthetic, where these depicted craft kind of line up with the way that cars at the time looked, the way that, I mean, it's just, it
Yeah,
just,
yeah, yeah. No, I
just,
hear what you're saying.
yeah, it just always kind of struck me. And the complexity and size of the required conspiracy, to keep something like this under wraps. Now, I've read and heard, there are theories that there are in fact aliens living among us, or that they're conducting surveillance in coordination with our own governments. And the theory goes that, you know, the general public wouldn't couldn't handle this information, that it would dismantle our religious systems and our systems of government, that information came out, so that there's a concerted effort between the aliens and our governments at the highest levels to keep this thing a secret. But I just don't have that much faith in people. I feel like, do I think that an alien crashed in Roswell and that the government managed to keep that a big secret all this time? No, I think a much more logical explanation is that they were doing some tests and some people saw something and the story grew from there. I mean,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
to me just seems so much more of an elegant solution.
Well, it's not even elegant. It's Occam's razor, right? The uh,
The
um,
simplest
the
solution.
simplest explanation is the explanation
Right.
in general, right? All other things being equal. So, if someone saw, that's why you go to these weather balloons, and there's different types of satellite things, and you know, probably most of what people see are is explainable.
I've seen many clips online of the Starlink satellites. The way that they appear in the night sky is a
Mhm.
line of lights. Have you seen this?
I have not,
Yeah,
but
people see it and say, "Oh my God, what is that? That is so weird." They take a video of it and then they drop it on Reddit and say, I saw these lights above. What is this?" And the answer's the Starlink satellites. It's a very
okay.
weird thing that they look like a string of lights in the night sky, but it is what it is.
Yeah, and that's a lot of what you hear on some of these like cable TV shows, The Unexplained, and they have someone with a film just like that. It's a string of lights. So
And I would love as much as anyone to see video that clearly shows something, not in infrared, not all blurry, not, above the horizon. But I would love to see something like that. I would be, I'm just as open.
I don't think we've solved everything here, but it would be impossible for, again, we're reiterating this, for Earth to hold the only life in the vast expanse of space, I believe.
Agreed.
I
Agreed.
believe it would be ignorant to think otherwise. Um, and are UAPs evidence of visits from intelligent extraterrestrial life? I don't know. No one's proven it. But like the report from NASA states, it is at least plausible. A UAP that is completely unexplained, it's plausible, it's possible, but we have not proven it. So at this point, no, you'd have to like show me, right? Show me the money, right?
Yeah.
And but like NASA says, we've got to apply the strictest science. Don't just assume that whole thing. Hey, we can't explain it. It's got to be otherworldly. No, 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 no. We need to prove that it's not from here
Yeah.
and that it's not fabricated. I mean, prove like beyond anything that this cannot be from Earth in any way, shape, or form, whether it's fabricated, whether it's natural, whether it's whatever. That has to be proven. And then you can't even say extraterrestrial intelligence. You say, this is clearly something we don't know what it is. And we
Yeah.
need that extraordinary evidence, like seeing someone land the thing and get out of it and say hello to you before you're going to say, I
Yeah.
think this is from another planet, right?
Right. And it's connected to one of my favorite parts of this discussion was when we talked about the vastness of space and how it cuts both ways. Because that's something I was talking about, the difficulty of traversing the distances that would need to be traversed even by an advanced life form. I mean, it is a very I think that many people, the average person, myself included, before I like read a little bit more about this, simply do not understand the distances involved. It's a very difficult thing for the human brain to get itself around. But I've read that like the Milky Way galaxy and the Andromeda galaxy will billions of years from now collide together. And people imagine when they hear that, like, oh, two galaxies of stars smashing into each other and there's all this fire. But no, actually, the distances are so great that the galaxies just merge and the stars never get anywhere near each other.
Yeah, yeah,
Another really interesting illustration of this is um, if you imagine a grain of sand as the sun. Okay, so that's the scale that we're on. You have our sun, and the earth is a speck next to the sun, and we're just a speck on the surface of the earth. So you have a grain of sand, and that's the sun. the next nearest star, you would have to put another grain of sand 3 miles away. And on that scale, that is how far apart the stars are.
Yeah, that's
That's the
crazy.
distances that have to be traversed. And of course, people will say like, well, yeah, but then you get to a point where you're so advanced that you're able to bend space-time, and that's how they're able to get to these different star systems. Yeah, I don't know. I just think that while I agree with your premise that Earth cannot be the only planet with life, it just can't be. I just can't accept that. I can accept that we're isolated because of the distances involved.
Yeah, yeah. No, I hear you. And like in the NASA report said, it's plausible. I mean, but they're not saying that's what the deal is. I mean, in other words, they can never for sure say they're not going to say it's impossible,
Yeah.
that it absolutely couldn't be. They say we can't say that. But again, we can't say at all that there's been anything that anyone's seen, filmed, has any evidence of that is proven to be extraterrestrial.
Well,
Except for, like an asteroid lands. Okay, that's
yeah.
something from off of this earth. So
How about these claims? Like, let me get your thoughts on this real quick before we wrap up.
yeah.
Your thought on these claims that a lot of the technology that we have today is actually derived from recovered alien technology from UFO crashes. So I've read that things like laser beams, GPS, microwave ovens, um, nuclear fusion, that a lot of this stuff was reverse engineered from crashed alien aircraft.
So you want to know what I think about that?
Yeah,
I do not believe that. And
because it doesn't it seem like you could just work backwards through these different advancements on a just a human scale and see like, oh, okay, we did this, we figured this out, and then we use that to get to this, and then it just seems too tractable.
yeah, yeah, and I feel like there's so much that I don't understand about how the world works. And people have, I mean, think of just radio, right? Radio, this little box, like when you're a kid, you probably had one in your room, right?
Oh yeah,
Little box, you put batteries in it or plug it in, and you turn it on, and you can like you could go on the AM and you could get like Chicago from I was in Maryland, right? Like if you hit the right, like, and it's just what coming out of the air, and then it comes out of a speaker and it's a person's voice. Are you kidding
yeah.
me? How is that even? I can't even wrap my head around that.
If you
So
described radio to a pilgrim,
they burn you at the stake.
they actually would.
And so the fact that so long ago people who were into these things, and who are very smart, inventive, creative people, incredible minds, they're figuring these things out. Like I totally could see that we are where we're at now based upon just the ingenuity of intelligent human beings. That's what
Yeah,
I think.
yeah. Okay. Um, One other point that I want to make was about because we're talking about like um, the universe and like traveling these great distances, and the could there be a life form that's so advanced that it figures out how to do it? There's another thing I'll just touch on because I feel like we would be remiss if we didn't mention this, and that is this idea of the way that we think about aliens is wrong. In other words, it's not that they're from a different star system and they traveled here, but that they're actually from another dimension, another time. And their command of the universe allows them to basically move in between dimensions. Um you might have read about like we live in a three-dimensional world where time is the fourth dimension, but a fourth dimensional being could move through time the same way that we move through space.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I've
So
heard
like
of discussions like these, and I have to tell you that a lot of them, it's really like it starts going over my head pretty quickly. That I'm
it
like,
gets
I'm just trying to wrap my brain around. I said, I understand the premise, but I don't know that I can really grasp it in my mind of what even it would look like, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it gets mathy and it gets deep really quick. But I did just want to mention that because that is another very viable and distinct possibility, is that like we're thinking of it in three-dimensional terms, but that this technology or this idea of quote aliens could actually be something that is like so beyond our comprehension in terms of them being multidimensional beings. And I know that sounds like I'm
Oh,
not
I
a
hear you're not a conspiracy theorist.
well, I was going to say I'm not a quantum
Oh yeah,
physicist, but
but I
that
don't know.
that too.
It's interesting what you're saying there. Like I know we've had a discussion about pets before, right? And it's almost like how I could see like how you say your cat and my dog, like they just think they don't know, like probably know they're gonna die. They just think this is the in I'm here, I'm now. Don't have a you know, it's just sort of like and for us to think about years and decades and history and the future and the past, like that's probably totally like right over their heads, right?
Totally.
Um, so I could put myself in that same place, and there's clearly, obviously, something that is so apparent to someone else that's totally over my head. Like I'm like that dog or that cat sitting there thinking about this fourth dimension, and I'm like, yeah, I don't have any clue what you're talking about. And it doesn't mean that it's not possible, right?
Just because an ant doesn't understand how a TV works.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't mean right. It doesn't mean that there's not a TV that's working, right? And just because I don't understand these dimensional discussions about how this time travel or manipulation or bending space doesn't mean that it's not possible. Other final thoughts? Final thoughts. I'm just saying, hey, keep your eyes open. Look for that app. Anything is possible. Although I don't think anything that anyone has right now has been proven as anything.
Yeah,
Um,
right. My final thought is be skeptical. And
yeah,
this that you should be skeptical, and let's like work through the let's work through the more probable, more likely explanations before we jump to uh, aliens.
exactly, exactly. Agreed, agreed. So I don't. I think we've put ourselves out there. We like the NASA report. Very scientific. That's the best way to go. And science equals skepticism, correct?
Correct.
You know, so I think that all makes sense and is in line exactly with what you said. So you know, that was an interesting discussion. And you know, I bet you next time that you're out for an evening walk, you'll be noticing something in the sky or looking up a little bit more than you have before. So
I like the
um,
topic a lot. Unfortunately, where I live, there's so much light pollution, it's hard to see anything in the night sky.
yeah, yeah, I hear you. So I guess we're just gonna thank everyone for listening to this episode. This is actually episode 18. Um, so again, people in the United States, the United Kingdom, Germany, Taiwan, Italy, Canada, listeners in Australia, Brazil, and Romania. Thanks for listening. If you like what you're hearing, hit follow or subscribe, depending on which application you're listening through. We're on many. And if you have ideas, definitely send us an email at benstevebalancedpodcast@gmail.com. I check it once a day just to see what's there. And we have had some people reaching out here and there with some ideas. So we really appreciate that.
Very cool. Balanced is produced by myself and Steve. Our music is by Four Giants. You can check them out on Bandcamp or wherever you stream music. And as always, thank you for listening. This is Ben.
And this is Steve.
And we are balanced.